number of events centered around the elections. Up until the elections, we will have that. Next week, Carl Livingston, another political science instructor, will lead a conversation on marijuana legalization. After that, we're going to have an open forum on discussing the issues of what to vote for, why the election works the way it works, why, whatever it is students want to talk about or know about with the election. So if you can come back then, that would be great to see you. Today, well, real quickly, do you know why the library does this? Does it seem strange to you the library has a conversation on social issues? Good. It's really an important thing for libraries to have places where different ideas can be brought to the table, where conversation can take place, where people can express their points of view. So in this room, I'm hoping everybody will feel free to express their point of view and have respect for everybody else who wants to express their point of view. So with that having said that, I would like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Zouari is a professor of political science here at Seattle Central and an expert in Middle East politics. And he's going to talk about the relationships, roles, and connections that politics in the United States and this presidential election have with politics in the Middle East. Right? Okay. Thank you. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Kelly, for inviting me. Thank you all for coming. Although most of you are, come by class. Kelly probably did not know that. So today we're going to try to talk about the Middle East politics and the link, or if there are any links between these politics and presidential elections. So I'm going to talk briefly, have just a few slides, and then just open it for discussion, and you can ask questions about the things that we're going to present to you. So some of you are familiar with the Middle East. It's Middle East and North Africa. It's a geographic unit that's pretty much connected. There's no break, and so it's from the Gulf, from Iran, all the way to Atlantic, to Morocco. So the Middle East comprises both Arab countries, Arab countries, but also non-Arab countries, which include Turkey, Iran, and Israel. With at least the ones that we're going to look at today, Iran and Israel, because they figure in most of the discussion about American foreign policy and then more about in the American elections. It's too bad that the debate so far, they have not really been focused on foreign policy. There are some bits and pieces of foreign policy, but the next one is going to be focused on foreign policy. So I would have liked to do this after the third debate, but that's okay. The importance of the Middle East and American foreign policy is due to the main factor, which is oil. We rely heavily on oil because we are in the advanced industrialized nations. Our allies, the Europeans, the Japanese, and now China, not a full ally, but we have good relations with China, trade relations at least. They also rely on oil. The oil is mostly in the Middle East. The other thing is Israel. Okay? In the United States, we have a very soft spot for Israel. Israel is perceived as a small nation, which on the map looks small. And of course, we have in our foreign policy, we make sure that Israel feels secure, it's protected, it's supported, both in terms of material support, military support, and moral support. And I would argue that Israel plays a huge role in American foreign policy, especially in democratic politics, because Jewish Americans who are supportive of Israel contribute a kind of large portion of contributions to the Democratic Party. But now we also see the Republicans trying to vie for these votes, because Jewish Americans tend to be highly organized and they vote in large numbers, but they also try to link their vote with candidates who support their agenda, national, but also with regard to Israel. The first thing I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on is the Arab Spring. And the Arab Spring has been in the news for a year now, and it started in a small country, size of Israel, where I was born and raised, Tunisia. Okay, Tunisia, the reason the Arab Spring started there, it's because most of the factors and elements that are conducive to change, and in this case, positive democratic change, were assembled in Tunisia. Tunisia has one of the highest literacy rates in the Middle East. It also invested in human resources because Tunisia doesn't have natural resources, and therefore, after its independence, Tunisian government put about a third of its budget in education. Something we should do. In the United States, we don't do that because we have, other competing interests. So what's the two candidates' position with regard to the Arab Spring? Well, we remember that Obama, in my view, did play a role in as a precursor to the Arab Spring. You remember that when he got elected, he made a very serious turn compared to the foreign policy and vis-a-vis the Middle East compared to George W. Bush. George W. Bush started 2 wars in the Middle East. Obama went to Cairo. He made his famous Cairo speech, and he talked to students, and he talked about a different view of the Middle East, a different relationship between us and the Middle East, and that relationship is not going to be based on conflict and war, etc. Animosity is going to be focused on education. It's going to be focused on exchange, trade, and investing in the young generation. So that really energized the young people in the Arab world, because they watched that speech and they thought it was a very big shift from George W. Bush, who was not very much like, or not like at all in the Middle East. Right? So when the Arab Spring came along, started in Tunisia, and then very quickly went into Egypt, which is the central country in the Middle East, and then spread to other countries. Libya, now it's in Syria, after going to Yemen. The United States has very strategic interest in the Middle East, as I mentioned, energy, and therefore invested heavily in stability in the Middle East. And the stability meant that we did not really pay much attention to democratic change, human rights. We were okay with the dictators as long as they provided stability. And in Tunisia, Ben Ali was, a former head of the police, very sophisticated system, practically put in motion a police state. At the same time, he did not neglect education, he did not neglect the economy. So Ben Ali was a similar dictator to Franco in Spain. But at the same time, he was corrupt. So most of these positive elements that Ben Ali regime had were kind of outweighed by nepotism and corruption. So when the challenges started to the dictatorships, the American position was like, let's wait and see. But very quickly, they decided that this is really serious, this is real, and these young people who are out in the streets, they're very peaceful. They are not shouting death to America, as we have seen in the late 70s in Iran. They're saying democracy. Bin Laden's name is nowhere to be seen. and in streets of Tunis and other cities. But even the conservatives, the Islamists, were not there. In Tunisia, the reason for that is because Ben Ali did a good job on them, arrested most of them, and threw the rest out, so they could not be there. So most of the people that we saw on television, that we followed on Facebook and Twitter, were very, technology savvy, were highly educated, and they basically spoke our language. So ultimately, Obama, because a lot of people were saying, Obama, come on, you gotta come out on the right side of history, including myself. I actually tweeted Obama, telling him, you better say something now, otherwise you're going to be late. And he made, speeches that coincided with the fall of the dictators. So while they were falling, he was saying, that's good. But before they fell, Hillary Clinton was not saying that what she was supposed to say. She continued to say that, Ben Ali or Hosni Mubarak are great allies, etc. But then they switched. And that's one of the reasons when Hillary Clinton went to Cairo, she was planted with tomatoes, because she, supported the dictator before, she switched sides. So the support came a bit late, but it came. Now, what's Romney's position? I haven't heard anything. They got to Arab Spring. He's not saying very much. In fact, what I heard from in little snippets from Romney is that he is, an Arabophobe and an Islamophobe. Most of his things that he said about Islam are very negative, and he considered that. He talked about Muslim radicals. That's fine, but also he hints that it's probably the culture. We'll see that a little bit, where when he goes to Israel, he makes these comments.
Something about intervening in Syria. That's why they recorded it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that too. So Rami's position is not clear. We don't know it, and the reason for that is because he doesn't have one. He's not really concerned about the Middle East. We will see that he's concerned a little more about Iran. So he's threatening Israel. Okay, Israeli-Palestinian conflict. During the mandate, Obama's mandate, we have seen very little or no progress on the two-state solution. The Israelis are still occupying the Palestinian territories. And another thing is that Obama came at a time where the conservatives are in power. Talking about the Likud party, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, one of the hawks of Israel, who does not really believe in the two-state solution. And even when he talks about the two-state solution, he is not specific what kind of Palestinian state, when he continues to build settlements, right? So Obama and Netanyahu, they have made, according to the Washington Post article, they have made a mess of their personal relationship. They don't really like each other. So Obama has some, points of contention with the Israeli government, because he cannot bring the Israeli government to stop the building of settlements. He cannot bring the Israeli government to, negotiate with the Palestinians, and that, of course, is creating a serious problem for American foreign policy, because the Palestinian issue is at the heart of Arab concerns. Romney, not much knowledge on the issue, but he, is committed to Israel's support because he sees votes, Jewish votes, and also he sees money, contributions to his campaign. Romney has raised millions and millions of dollars. We're talking about, not tens, but hundreds of millions of dollars. He himself is very rich, and of course, when he did his foreign policy tour, he kind of upset a lot of people, including the Brits, when they were working on the Olympics. He said something very derogatory that, sees problems with the organization, and he was saying that he was his organizing skills the Olympics in the States were better, which prompted the British Prime Minister to say that, you know, you're comparing London with, you know, a city in the middle of nowhere. He was right. So he, in Israel, actually, he made some condescending remarks about cultures. Okay, so he said culture makes all the difference. And he said, as I come here and I look out over this city and consider the accomplishment of the people of this nation, talking about Israel, I recognize the power of at least culture and a few other things. And basically he said that the Jewish culture is the reason Israel is dominating the Palestinians. Their culture is superior. Basically, he justified the domination of the Palestinians. Plus, he, said he explained it by, throwing out numbers that are not accurate. So he said, look at the Israeli GDP. Per capita, it's 21,000, when in fact it's close to 30,000. Right? And the Palestinians, he said that they make 10,000. In fact, the Palestinians, they don't even get to 3,000. So his numbers were kind of jumbled in his head, which shows that he doesn't really know what he's talking about. He just wants to get the support of the rich Jewish
Could I just
contributors.
just want to answer? There also the religious right are very much in favor. I mean, he's going to appeal to them too because they want stability for the Holy Land, and I mean they have designs on what goes on over there too. So he's got a broader base that he's trying to.
Right, he's trying to appeal to the religious right, but in this case he's trying to appeal to rich Jewish contributors, both here in the United States and Israel, because we allow Jews who are Israelis or Jews in the United States to participate in our internal affairs. If you contribute, for example, if you give to charity in Israel, in the United, and you're an American, you can deduct that from taxes. The only state where you could do that, because Israel and the United States are, very close, and therefore Jewish contributions from Israel to American campaigns are okay. But if the Saudis contribute to Romney goes to jail. You can't take that money; it's Arab money. But Jewish money is fine. So right there, the lines are blurred, and that's why you see this little picture here on the internet that he's being manipulated by the Jewish lobby. But we have to say that Obama gets more support from the Jewish contributors and the Jewish voters. Because the Democratic Party traditionally has been allied or supported by Jewish Americans and Israeli Jews. Now, the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges to American foreign policy is, of course, Iran. Okay, so Iran, why Iran? Well, Iran, it used to be our closest ally, second only to Israel. But then they had a revolution, and the revolution, unlike the Arab Spring, was anti-Western, anti-American. And the Ayatollah and the Islamic Republic, became enemies of the United States. And Ahmadinejad is continuation of that line. But also Ahmadinejad is dabbling in things that are not allowed, and that's nuclear energy. We haven't really proved that Iran wants to acquire a nuclear weapon. Iran has not admitted that they are trying to develop a weapon, and we don't really have real evidence to show that Iran is doing so. But we don't trust Iran; they don't trust us, and therefore we can say that they are trying to acquire nuclear weapons. So Obama has been kind of successful because he's strangling Iran using economic sanctions, comprehensive sanctions, and also UN inspections. And he has not taken off the table the possibility of using hard power, basically, bombing the Iranian factories. Romney is trying to gain some points by criticizing Obama's position, but he doesn't have a real position. He has a vague threat, which is like, I will do things differently. If I were president, I will make sure that Iran doesn't develop a nuclear weapon. How are you going to do it? This is incredible sanctions, right? Well, he, is hinting at war. That we should follow the Israeli example, because the Israelis, they want to attack Iran, but we're not really open to it. Plus, the Israelis, they don't really have the capacity to attack Iran. They need our help. Just to make the trip there and come back, they need our protection, they need the refueling in midair, etc. And unless we support them, plus the fallout, unless we are behind them, the Europeans are behind them, they're not going to be able to get away with it. So Romney is, he's not very, except for being alarming and threatening with war, he doesn't really have a specific plan, and he's basically criticizing this, the comprehensive sanctions as not working. They have not slowed down the nuclear program. The Iranians are not backing down. They are saying, everything is open, come and see. And if you'll see that we don't have. So the controversy about whether Iran is close, how close it is it months, is it years to developing a weapon? The whole controversy is not very helpful, because even if Iran develops the weapon itself, they have to develop also the capacity to deliver the weapon, which is a whole other logistical issue. So, but because we don't like the Iranians, because of their attitude towards us, it sounds with regards to our foreign policy that we should do something about Iran. Syria, it's a very tough case. Okay? We have intervened in Libya, and it was successful or semi-successful intervention, because we got rid of Gaddafi. We have a new Libyan government that's friendly to the United States, and that itself is facing challenges, because the Libyans attacked the American consulate in Benghazi and killed the Ambassador Stevens and 3 other Americans, plus about 4 Libyans, and that has become now a part of Romney's criticism. But with regard to Syria, we don't know who to support. Okay? We are supporting the resistance, but we are also afraid to make the same mistake we made in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, we supported the Taliban, and guess what happened? They turned against us. We trained them very well, and they are using that training to get us. Bin Laden, remember, was trained by the CIA, and ultimately became the biggest threat and attacked the United States in 9/11. So the United States wants to avoid that kind of mistake by trying to identify which elements of the divided Syrian resistance to support, because there are elements in the Syrian resistance that are jihadists, similar to the Taliban. And if we give them these sophisticated weapons, they may take over in Syria, which will make Syria antagonistic to the United States. So we don't want to make that kind of mistake.
In Afghanistan, technically, we support the Mujahideen. Now, the Mujahideen and the Taliban were completely separate organizations. The Mujahideen gave birth to what is the Northern Alliance, the general that was assassinated by the Taliban. So technically, we support not the Taliban. The Taliban just took control after we left.
No, we supported the Taliban too. The Taliban was part of the Mujahideen. The real Mujahideen were really the Taliban. Mujahideen is actually those who struggle, it's part of the Islamic jargon, and that's used by the Taliban. They are the real Mujahideen. In fact, the ones who came to the White House, the Mujahideen sat on the floor with Ronald Reagan, they were Taliban. The ones who went to Texas and met with Bush about pipelines and oil concessions, etc., they were Taliban. They were not, the Northern Alliance. Northern Alliance were all scattered all over Europe. They were sitting in coffee shops, smoking cigarettes, later we gathered all of them and brought them back on horseback. So the dilemma is, we have to be careful about which group to support, so we don't end up with something like Afghanistan. So there is also a need for a new strategy, because today, for example, in The Economist, there is talk about there's a need for intervention from the West and the Arabs in Syria, because it has become a human tragedy. About 30,000 people have been killed. What's wrong with saying? Well, he's basically criticizing Obama's position on Syria, and he's saying that look at Syria, it's a huge tragedy, 3,000 people. What is our policy? We're not doing anything, so he's just criticizing, but he's not offering anything that we can see. All right, well, let's open it for questions. Who would like to ask a question? Raise your hand, okay?
I don't know if this is an actual fact or not, but from my understanding that there's actually happens to be a large Jewish population actually living in Iran. In fact, from my understanding, it's like the second largest population of outside of Israel. And I've heard two different things that is not the case, and also I've heard that is the case. I was wondering if you could.
Well, the largest Jewish population outside of Israel is here in the
Right.
United States, and that's specifically New York.
Right.
The second largest is in Paris.
Okay.
So Iran, I'm not sure I haven't looked at the numbers, but I'm not sure where it stands. Because you have, the Jews are in many places. The Arab Jews, after 67, many of them left. But the assumption they left for Israel, but they did not. They actually, the North African Jews, they went to France. So, for example, in Tunisia, there's still maybe 1% of the population is Jewish. Used to be a little more. And in 67, we talked about that in class, 67 was a big war. And of course, the Arabs were defeated, and the Arab Jews felt insecure because there was some attacks on them. And they left. Most of them left to France.
From what I've been told and heard, and in my own personal experience, a lot of American Jews are actually fairly critical of Israel and its policies. Like, I definitely hear the right complaining about how Jews aren't supportive enough of their nation. So that seems slightly at odds with what you were saying. So
What did I say that's at odds with the Jews?
I thought I had heard you saying a lot of American Jews want to support Israel.
Yeah, the majority do that, but there is a number of Jews. Usually they're human rights activists. They're pro-peace, etc. They support a peaceful and just solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, both inside of Israel and also in the United States and around the world. But they are a minority. Yeah, they're not the majority. I would put that minority at less than 20%. But you're right. Human rights organizations, some of the vocal human rights activists are either Israelis or Jews from around the world.
Okay, you mentioned the tax credit that Israel does for towards the American Jewish folks. Do the Irish have the same thing?
With Irish?
Yes, with the IRA.
I doubt it. The Irish, if you gave them money, you would accuse of terrorists, of supporting terrorists. Even though Irish Americans did engage in that, but it was illegal, and you could go to jail for that. But that's because the IRA was considered to be terrorist organizations before they were mainstream. But with regard to Israel, our support for Israel is because of the traditional alliance. We perceive Israel as a strategic ally. It's the only, or it was the only democracy in the Middle East, but not anymore. And of course, the Israelis, they are very receptive to our interests. They support our interests. Okay, who was first? Kelly, you wanna moderate that?
Sure.
The hands?
I'm not sure who raised their hand first, but I'll pay better attention. I think it was you.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you perceive Iraq's relationship to Iran historically, with us, the West, ousting the democracy in the 50s that was in Iran and replacing it with the Shah, and then the revolution with what is happening now with al-Sadr, and I'm a veteran, so I've been in Iraq, in the Middle East, and with al-Sadr's Mahdi militia and his actual militia holding positions in the Iraqi parliament, their relationship with Iran. How do you see that, especially now that technically we're not out, the State Department's there, but we've done the withdrawal from Iraq, the majority of the forces.
Yeah, there's a historic relationship between Iran and Iraq, and during the Shah's period it was an antagonistic relationship, so Saddam Hussein and the Shah did not see eye to eye, and there was a conflict over the Shat al-Arab, which is the waterway that Iraq was claiming, but the Shah would control, and they finally had an agreement. I think in Morocco and in Rabat, and we saw after during the Iranian revolution, Saddam Hussein tried to take advantage of the Iranians being distracted by the revolution and invade Shat al-Arab, which led to a 10-year war that devastated both countries. 1 million on both sides were killed. But the things now have changed, and the relationship with Iran has changed because the majority, nearly all of Iran is Shia. That's a sect of Islam, and about 90% are Shia, and Iraq is the majority Shia. So now that after our intervention, we had elections and the majority Shia came to power with Maliki, who was a Shia, and of course there is this affinity, the Shia affinity between the two countries. The holy sites, Shia sites are in Iraq, and therefore you get a lot of pilgrims from Iran in there. So the relationship has shifted, and that is a big concern to the United States. The United States was aware of, if they're going to have democratic elections, then the Shia are going to win. But then they were not completely sure of which way they're going to look, and it looks like they are going to have to normalize relations with Iran, which is a very big concern for the United States. So if the things don't go well with Iraq, we might see an Iraq-Iran alliance emerging, and the same dilemma with Afghanistan, right? We have a side which turned against us. So in Iraq, we probably are facing similar dilemma if we don't manage that situation well.
I don't understand why the world's so obsessed with Iran making nuclear weapons. I mean, as a sovereign state, it's allowed to make its own nuclear weapons if it wants to in defense. And I feel like America and Israel are being hypocritical on that fact, seeing how they both have nuclear weapons, and I don't understand how other nations are allowed to have them, but one country can't.
That's a very good question, right? And that's a question that everybody is kind of struggling with, because Iran, we know that Ahmadinejad, whenever he talks, he says bad things about Israel. He also knows that Israel has nuclear weapons. So why allow Israel to have nuclear weapons but not Iran? What's that about? We don't even acknowledge Israelis and the United States, they don't even acknowledge the fact that Israel has close to 300 warheads, nuclear warheads. Israel also has not signed the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. It said that we don't sign. Iran has. Iran signed the non-proliferation, nuclear non-proliferation treaty, and that's why we're holding its feet to the fire. We're saying you signed this, you're not going to proliferate, so be careful. And Iran says, yeah, why does Israel have them? And we are saying, okay, shut up. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you. So it's a big dilemma. It's not very convincing. Plus, we do have them. We have more than anybody, right? So it gets complicated with regard to foreign policy. How can somebody who smokes tell their kids not to smoke? I don't think they can, because otherwise they look like a fool, right? So we've got weapons that are supposed to be deadly, and we are telling people they're bad for you. Don't get them. And of course they're not going to listen. So like a parent, if the kid doesn't listen to his smoking father, the father is going to use violence to convince them. They're going to, Say you're grounded or beat them up. The same thing with the United States. We say, okay, we have them, but you can't have them. And if you want to have them, we will hit you. So Obama is becoming a little more creative. Okay? So Obama has a plan. What's the plan?
Sanctions.
It's a nuclear-free world. No, not sanctions. He is saying, okay, you say that we have them and blah, blah, blah. He said, we are willing to give them up. So he has this track, where is it he calls? The goal is to have a nuclear-free world.
Never happened.
Not
Never
gonna
happened.
happen.
Well, never say never.
It's not
Never
gonna
say
happen.
never.
Unless we blew ourselves all up and we're not here anymore.
Never say
Until then.
my approach is never say never.
It's not realistic.
We might reach. It actually depends on you. You are pushing the world in this direction or that direction. If Obama says nuclear-free world and you push for Obama, then he's going to say yes, nuclear-free world.
I like what he's saying, but I don't really think that everybody in the world is gonna stop being violent to get what they have to get
Yeah.
to where they're gonna get. That's, I mean, you watch Star Trek and they still bomb the hell out of each other, so it's just like, that's just part of human nature. I believe if we go into outer space and we find a planet and they have some creatures there that will work for us, we'll make them slaves and not even think anything about it as long as they can't actually communicate with us.
Well, I would argue that, for example, okay, I mean, it is true that if you look at history, there's a lot of violence. But let's look at one specific area. Okay? Let's go and look at Europe, Western Europe. Western Europe, they killed each other more than anybody else. More than anybody else. I mean, they think that everybody else is more violent than them, but they were the biggest, more violent. And what happened after World War II? They stopped. Completely stopped. And they're even bringing in people from out of Western Europe, Eastern Europe, into the Union. The problems they're facing today are actually economic. They're not military. Greece is not saying Germans are coming to invade us. No, Greece is saying the Germans, they're greedy. They won't give us money to spend and have a party.
But you do notice that now that things are
Excuse me,
getting
there was
ugly
a
over there,
hand
that we're
up
getting,
over here.
Okay.
they're getting the neo-fascists and those guys.
But they're minorities. We have to look at the big picture. In Europe, you've done very, very well in moving away from conflict. Even though they killed each other by
There was-
hundreds of millions.
There was one hand here and then there's another one over here.
Okay.
Was it you?
Right now, like in Syria, Turkey's coming closer to intervening from like the United States point of view in foreign policy. Would it be good to allow Turkey to intervene, or does the United States need to as well?
Well, Turkey is our ally, of course, and it's democratic. It's trying to get into the European Union. It's also a very important country in terms of size. It has one of the largest populations, similar to Iran and Egypt. It's also advanced economy. It's the highest, fastest growing economy in that area. And for those reasons, Turkey is not interested in going to war against Syria because that will disrupt its prosperity. And they're not stupid. The Turks are not stupid. So they will not let the Syrians intimidate them. They will respond right away. They will respond, and they did. When the Syrians tried to shove them, they turned back. Right? They also are asserting their authority by bringing commandeering a civilian airlines coming from Russia. And that's not war, but that's showing power that we can do it. Okay? But at the same time, Turkey is accepting playing the American foreign policy card by taking money from the United States, from American friends like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and providing weapons to the Syrian resistance, safe houses. Most of the refugees, hundreds of thousands who left Syria are in Turkey, and the Syrian army is not allowed to pursue them. So they can do all those things, but to go to war directly with Syria, they're not interested in that. But the second part is that if we decide to intervene, and I say we're talking about those who don't want to see, more Syrians get killed. We're talking about, you know, the West, that's NATO, and also the Arab countries. The Arab countries, because Syria is an Arab country, the Arab countries have to be on board. If the West does it, it's not going to look good by itself. So the Arab countries have to. So if we reach that point, then maybe Turkey could also participate. Would it be a coalition?
Okay, we have a question here, and
Okay.
then here.
I'm wondering, you kind of hinted a little bit, I'm wondering if you could talk more a little bit in depth of the influence of Russia and China with Iran and Syria.
So I repeated the first part.
If you could talk about the influence and how it plays a role into it with Russia and China, with Iran and Syria.
Right. That's a very important point in diplomacy or international politics, where the system itself is not conducive to the West being, let's say, effective in solving or intervening in Syria, because there's a balance of power that we have to think about. Who's supporting Syria? Well, Syria is supported by two superpowers, military at least, Russia and China, and they do have, you know, veto power in the United Nations. So if we go try to convince the United Nations to pass a resolution, so you know, there's complete intervention, we have seen that neither China nor Russia are willing to play along, and they have used the veto. So we have to take that into account. However, both the Chinese and the Russians will look really bad if they continue to oppose an intervention when the number of dead is increasing to the tens of thousands. So there is actually a threshold where the Russians will start looking bad, and the Chinese will start looking callous. Because the Chinese have huge interests in the Middle East in terms of economic interests, not military, but economic. The Russians, they are the largest exporter of arms to Syria. So they have also an economic military interest in Syria. Basically, it's about money. Can we convince the Russians and the Chinese to stop their support for Syria? I think we can, especially if we bring on board all the Arab countries.
This is right here.
Going back to Israel a little bit, Netanyahu has recently been emphasizing how close Iran is to a nuclear weapon, supposedly, especially at the UN General Assembly. But doesn't Israel have a bit of a history of urgently announcing how close Iran is? Why should this latest threat, I guess, be taken more seriously than previous threats?
Well, Netanyahu is very clever, because Netanyahu, I don't think he's interested in doing it himself, meaning attacking Iran. He wants to get us to attack Iran. I don't even think that he wants to be in on the action. His interest. He wants to get the United States to do to Iran what they did in Iraq, and that's not going to happen. Iran is very different from any of the other countries. Iran is a very tough cookie to crack. It has national support, even though the Islamic Republic is not very popular. When Iran is attacked, historically the Iranians will coalesce and they will fight. And they have a lot of ways to fight. A lot of ways. Their reach is deeper than that of Iraq or any other state. So we know that. Plus, in the United States and even in Israel, they are divided about attacking Iran. Some Israelis say it's not a bad idea. Some Israeli intelligence officers from Mossad, they're saying it's all crap. Iran is not close to developing a weapon. In the United States, also intelligence says that Iran is still far. But I will speculate and say that even if Iran developed its nuclear weapon, it has nothing to do with it. What can you do with a nuclear weapon? The only thing that's of concern is that the Arabs will develop it. Because the genie is out of the bottle. Everybody knows how to make a bomb. The Egyptians will develop it. Probably the first one will be the Saudis. But even if they develop it, what are they going to do with it? Nothing. Have we done anything with our nuclear weapons? Yes. What? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But that's because nobody had them. That's the only reason we used them, because nobody. But once the Russians had them, we shut up.
I think with all it seems like a lot of things are essentially intersecting kind of like a spider web in the Middle East, and the beginning of Asia with Persia and Iran. Now, with regard to Syria and Iran, don't you feel like, for instance, the Russians have been sending like brand new tanks, as well as fielding their 5th generation surface-to-air missiles and radar, which is capable of preventing even our stealth bombers and our Patriot missiles from targeting anything in Syria because it's Russian-made, as well as sending the Russian troops and Russian naval forces to the coast. And Iran supported Damascus with Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad, some of those regions. You also have Russia and China, though Russia finally signed on the United Nations the sanctions against Iran, they still continued to, they voted to basically do away with the dollar and purchase Iran's oil in the form of gold. So essentially, don't you see, like, there's a lot of pushback, and I don't have a problem with the Iranians. I have a lot of friends who are Iranians. I think the issue is the Ayatollah, who are 12ers, and don't you feel that perhaps their main goal is to establish an Islamic caliphate according to their Sharia law?
The problem in Syria is that it doesn't really matter who's helping whom, because the challenges are from within. Nobody is trying to invade Syria. So if somebody is trying to invade Syria, you can try to get the help from another power. But the problem is from within. And when the resistance is from within and the people want to change the regime, there is no amount of military power that's going to stop them. So ultimately, if all the Syrians come on board, like what happened in Libya, then Assad's regime will fall. Now it's because Assad's regime still has a lot of support from within. It's important to get the support, diplomatic support from without, but that doesn't count. We saw that in Libya. In Libya, the Russians and the Syrians were also doing the same thing they're doing in Syria. But it didn't count. Why? Because all the Libyans came together and they did it. Right? The NATO intervened because the Libyans were all right there. So,
and that's one of the reasons why the Russians and the Chinese are saying don't go into Syria. And if you remember, Gaddafi warned us, he warned the West, don't overthrow me because if you do, radicals and Al-Qaeda will take over. He warned us of that.
Right, but that's why I said we are being selective this time on who to give the weapons to, because now we have people on the ground, CIA, etc., who are identifying the groups and not giving weapons to those who might be Salafists or jihadists. It's not going to be useful. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming. Please give your appreciation. To have his expertise here on our campus, and we'll try to take advantage of it as much as we can. Thank you so much for coming today.
You guys have
November
in the morning?
29th.
November 29th, we have a full event dedicated
Yeah, just one day.
at Islam in the United States.
This quarter, just one.
So you'll see there's some parallels there.
What kind of classes do you have in the mornings? English classes or other?
Most times. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Oh, yeah, campus services.
Solid army.
Yeah, well, we American dominated.
I think I can try to agree with some that are.
No, one this way.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
What is our paper?
Very aggressive. Which I understand.
I think passion is more.
Well, yeah, all right.
I think it's more passion.
It's a, we're similar.
What?
Passion, right from across is very aggressive. And,
What class are you in? Yeah. Okay.
what am I trying to say? I'm missing a word. Do you have any know you want to say we can make it work?
Well, it's
Complicates.
it's interesting.
You're very-
Yeah, you are.
Not at all.
Like,
Alright.
The goal, make the
Well.
media fair, and the old.
Who's saying this?
Most of them are getting proposed to people for very
Who?
one
Be
perspective.
more specific.
It's not very broad.
There's no.
That's a very different perspective in the rest of the media, which is nice.
But it's three.
Well,
The clash between.
We all know the media is not
Well, it's infallible.
completely.
But you're saying this is a game.
Different media. And what do you mean by the media? Conservative media.
Yeah, America when it comes to this, it's not, in the Middle East,
They've
it's all
seen
fairly.
what's going on, like, what's so up there is a fight between
I
them.
mean, I personally.
You know, what's the point of fight, both of them fight for? They're targeting
Iran,
one,
it's not something
taking
for
over.
people.
Well, they're just.
Oh, yeah.
Iran, you're right.
Right.
They are beyond crazy.
But not-
They are helping on Palestine.
Well, yeah.
They want to return to what it was.
That-
Yeah,
That is their.
Yeah, they're secretly.
But not so secret, but it's real
That's not actually their.
Right now.
That seems to be their aim, cause if you.
But that is their.
Mullahs
So
or.
it's not,
Mullah-
it is what they
Well,
talk about, it's what they've been performing for.
They're not gonna attack Israel, when they say,
I mean, it's like the president, like
Israel.
Ahmed Johnson.
They're not gonna do it because they can't do it.
Yeah, I know.
Israel, not
They're religious.
Which is why the Ayatollah said he wanted it. He could get rid of
So
it.
this is more long.
Yeah, he's the real.
He gave them
Yeah,
the
It's
presidency.
kind of like
But
Dick Cheney.
the game is.
They gave them the presidency to make people feel that they had an election.
Iran,
No, people are really like.
Here's the obvious that everyone knows. The point I'm trying to make is,
Europeans, they're not.
like a lot of the.
By example.